Hi there and welcome. Today we're going to speak with Mercredan about consciousness and its evolution. And my name is Delane. Francis is in the background at the moment getting ready to channel Mercredan for us today. What we would like to talk about today is beginning with things like when did consciousness first begin in human consciousness, and about if we could be more aware about consciousness coming through us, how could we do that? Things like that and more. Okay. What we'd like you to do, if you could, is like our video if you enjoyed it, and click subscribe and keep updated with our upcoming YouTubes. And yeah, so now we're going to cross live to Francis. Over to you, Francis.
Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Everything begins and ends with consciousness. And each time that we come to speak, it is trying, shall we say, to translate something into human terms. Something is as complex as one does not understand it. So we begin with the beginning. Consciousness, shall we say, emerged enough to begin a conversation.
Thank you, Mercredan. So when did consciousness actually begin, and what shape did that take?
Such a complex consideration. Scientists have been attempting for as long as thought to understand the beginnings of all things. And yet it is, shall we say, an impossible task. Shall we try to put it this way? When there is nothing, how is it possible to understand that? How is it possible to understand there is nothing and yet everything exists? And so it is, shall we say, that consciousness begins by the recognition that there is a paradox. And that is the beginning of the thought, shall we say, or in greater terms, out of the great sea of awareness begins a limited form, the extension of consciousness prevailing and recognizing there are potentials. So that is the beginning. One might consider this from your limited perspective. Somewhere in the vast background of time, as you measure it, began the first inklings of perception. That is, the idea that something emerged And in human terms, for something to emerge, there must have been a great sound. And so you say, this is the ultimate cosmic boom. And so you make up your stories. In the beginning was the word, was the sound current, because that is how we might visualize it, how we might consider it. Now it becomes possible to understand the unbelievable. You understand? Now we can limit the unbelievable into the believable. And now the story begins. Now humanity can make sense of it in its early stages, and then humanity names things, defines things, and analyzes things to make them more and more and more tiny and tiny and tiny, always expecting to come to the final answer. Humanity has finally understood everything. But that is an impossible task from the perspective of limited form. Does that answer the question?
Yes, in part. So if humanity didn't interpret the beginning, how different would it be from consciousness's perspective?
Consciousness creates everything. And so it is that how can, shall we say, the playwright perceive the play that it has written? The playwright writes the play and it is acted on the stage. And as it unfolds, shall we say, the script is moderated, the storyline is become more believable, and so humanity emerges from consciousness, and consciousness allows humanity to make sense of its world. I want to say this, as I have constantly encouraged, one creates one's own reality. But that is not truly the whole of that, because one creates one's reality in concert with the fields of influence one is engaged in. And so it is, shall we say, one creates within the context of and in alignment with the original consciousness that formed it all. In other words, you cannot create against the flow. Every creation comes with its consequence. Why? Because consciousness is engaged. Does that make sense? Does it follow on?
Yes, thank you. So you're saying that consciousness is not separate from our creating of our reality.
You are not separate from consciousness itself. There is no separation other than what consciousness itself outlays. In other words, consciousness has created the perception of separation in order to engage in its personal evolution. So consciousness is playing out its great schema. It is evolving itself by its interactions with its cosmic forces and its, shall we say, galactic forces, and so on with all the fields of influence, as if, shall we say, one is the manufacturer, the designer of a great game. One starts simply. One has the basic rules, shall we say, and then one engages and modifies the rules as the game becomes more complex and the learning more intelligent. And you understand, so as the game and complexities increase, so does the experience, and so does the intelligence. Shall we say then, the greatest intelligences play the most difficult of games. So you do not expect a child to play a game that is designed for, shall we say, intelligent adults. It is beyond their comprehension. And so it is that the great games that are being acted out in the world, shall we say, the great, shall we call them the political games that are being played out, are simply consciousness exploring what its individual natures will allow. Humanity then is a minor player in the great cosmic life. And it is from this perspective that, shall we say, planets and stars and galaxies have their own individual characteristics. They are, shall we say, intelligences well beyond the ability of humankind to understand at the mental level. But for humankind to understand it, shall we say, at the intelligence level, of course it is possible. The closer one comes to the natural sequence of consciousness, the greater one's ability to, shall we say, understand the complexities. I understand this is a difficult notion to come to terms with.
Thank you, Mercredan.
I want to say this. That is why it is more relevant in the human domain to begin to understand the procedures for creating one's own experience. And that is because one, first of all, wants to decide what is it I wish to experience, not what is it I wish to create. You understand there is a difference. So shall we say, if you want to understand, shall we say, the experience of someone else, then create a situation, you become as they are. If one is trying to consider, I understand another, even though I am nowhere near their experience, then you are creating, shall we say, a consequence that comes with its own brief understanding. And shall we say, then you realize that spirituality is not separate from any other aspect within the physical world. So spirituality aligns with the process of living, of working, of economies, of politics. All of it is engaged within the field of influence of spirituality. And shall we say then, as a unit, a nation is experiencing certain qualities. There are the ideas that every nation is having the same challenges and problems, but that is not necessarily the case. And even in the wider context, the natural forces come to bear on specific locations for specific purpose and awakening. Awakening then is the notion that one awakens in consciousness from one's sleep or from one's ignorance. And thus, shall we say, it ties in to the moment of time, in your sense, of the shift in consciousness. That is a general awakening to the unity of your global community.
Okay, thank you, Mercredan. That makes sense. So how can we be more aware of our creating or being in the experience and choosing that is connected to consciousness?
The greatest difficulty, as I just pointed out, is ignorance. Ignorance is, shall we say, in the same vial as denial is. So one creates an experience one wishes to have. One engages in the experience until one reaches the edges of it, where its opposite is lying. You arrive at that point and begin to resist that opposite. And so you begin to make rules and laws and punishments and anything else to avoid having to experience its opposite. But the creation of the experience of anything is both sides of the coin. So one cannot avoid its opposite without experience it without judgment. This is a key reality. If you want to create anything at all, be ready to experience the whole.
Can you give us an example?
This is why some people create vast wealth, that is monetary wealth. And because they are willing to experience not having it, they set up charities and they donate their wealth for the benefit of a greater whole, because they are aware that they have had, shall we call it, the luck to have great wealth. So they experience it not only as having, but they are also experiencing not having. And so they offer what they have for a greater purpose. And in doing so, open the doorway to greater wealth. It comes in, it expands, they are aware that they have the fortune, and therefore they can let it go. These are the great teachers of, shall we call it, wealth creation. So shall we say, if you want to create wealth, find ways to give it away. Find ways that benefit the most.
So thank you. What would be an example of a creation or an experience somebody's having that's in denial?
Shall we take the same? You have an experience of wanting wealth. You create the wealth, but you are holding on to it because of the fear of losing it. What then occurs, one loses everything else around you. Then people come and ask for help and you deny it, and they do not come ever again, and so on. Your children and your family and everyone begins to tighten the grip. and eventually it is so tight that the wealth is wasted away. Does that explore that?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So if we're going to be more conscious about choosing experiences, then we're more likely to consider the flip side of the experience.
That is correct. One, let us say, not the flip side of the experience, but the entire experience. You understand? The creation occurs in a certain way. One creates what one desires for the purpose of not experiencing its opposite. So the experience is the container of the creation. It is difficult to explore this without referring back to one's point of focus within the existing reality, because it separates one from every other alternative. And when one creates a limitation, one simply is putting a boundary within the field of influence. But beyond that, it is still radiating out from the very core of experience itself, the consciousness that is creating it for you. You understand? So shall we say, once again, the wealth person is focused in one reality, but an alternative reality is created at the same point. That is, when one is in denial of its opposite experience, the opposite experience arises in an alternate reality. And so one has, shall we say, brought to bear poverty for another alternative perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes,
it is complex, and yet it is truly a simplicity, because one is not limited within the physical boundaries of time and space as you experience them. You understand, this opens up all of the discussions that higher science is attempting to bring under control.
Very interesting. Is there anything more you'd like to add to this topic before we go today, Mercredan?
Once again, it is only, shall we call it, a place to contemplate. Every time we come to talk, it is to drop, shall we call them little seeds. One takes away and contemplates. How does this affect my life? How do I make use of this? And one is sitting in that state of contemplation. That is, meditation is to remove the outside. Contemplation is to bring out and grow the seed and, shall we say, listen to the heart. And as always, I mean the heart of the matter is the center of one's own consciousness, where the light that is the radiance, better point, the radiance of the divine core shines its filaments of light. Enough for today. And once again, thank you for your courage to engage in such a study of humanity's purpose. Thank you, and I will go.
Thank you, Mercredan. So, thank you everyone who joined us today. If you enjoyed today's session, please like this video and subscribe so you can find our channel easily next time. We'll be here again in 4 days with Libby, and she's going to be speaking on living in the physical, a unique perspective. That sounds interesting, doesn't it? So have a beautiful weekend and bye for now.